I played a chess tournament about a month ago, and I'm pretty sure I played my worst tournament game ever. I've lost plenty of tournament games, of course, but this one, for some reason, kind of hit a little bit harder than the other ones. I was winning. I had a better position, and I knew I had a better position, and then I didn't really know what to do, and I made some mistakes that threw away the whole advantage, and still, it should have actually been a draw at that point. And then later, I threw that away as well and went on to lose the game. And honestly, this one hit pretty hard for some reason. Like, usually I'm okay with losing because losing is a great opportunity to learn and get better. But somehow, this one was just kind of brutal just because of the way that it went and the way that the tournament was going. I had just lost a few games in a row, and I really needed a win on this one. I thought I was going to be able to, and then ended up losing, and things just were not going well for me. But sometimes I feel like the most painful lessons are the ones that kind of stick with us the best. And so I want to show you through this game and show you some of the lessons that I've learned from it. Hopefully they can be helpful for you as well in some of your games. So let's dive in. I was playing with the white pieces, and right out of the opening, things got weird. I mean, this is called the modern defense, and I just don't play against it that much. But I thought maybe, like, often it will transpose into something like a Pirtz, and so I just played 2 pawns in the center, and then basically what I'm often looking to do is bring this bishop out and the queen, castle long, and maybe also push the f-pawn just to start kind of putting some quick pressure on the king side, maybe trade off this dark squared bishop and so on. So let's see, I played that bishop out as mentioned right away. And then they played the c-pawn. They played up to c5. And this is where, like, I had never played against anything like this before, and it looks like that's a free pawn, but I was a little worried that there was some reason why I shouldn't take it, and I don't know. Honestly, I'm just going to go through the opening a little bit quickly here because it doesn't matter too much, but I think I was actually kind of worse out of the opening. I did not play it correctly. But I did continue with my plan. I pushed the f-pawn, and then here I brought my knight to defend this one and captured with the knight, partly because I didn't want to capture with the bishop because I didn't want black to be able to just trade off their knight for my bishop, because I wanted my bishop to be able to put pressure on the dark squares around the king if they ended up castling in that direction. So I took with my knight, and they played their knight out. I continued developing. And then I decided, after they castled, I decided to push this pawn because their knight, I believe, only has 1 square. That's not quite true. Their knight could go here, but then I feel like I can just push here and their knight is going to be lost. So yeah, I just figured that pushing e5 was going to actually put their knight back on the back rank, and it did. And so now I'm starting to feel pretty good. I'm getting developed. I actually developed my bishop. The engine says that this was a mistake for some reason, but anyway, it seemed like the right thing to do to me. And, you know, they had to spend a couple moves getting their knight kind of back in the game, right? And so I finished my development. We made a trade, and then I castled. And so now this is going to be an opposite side castling game. I'm going to want to push these pawns, maybe bring rooks over here and attack the king. And really, through the whole game, my opponent didn't actually show any sign of doing the same on this side, of trying to attack my king. And so I feel like I had the right strategy. My attack got off the ground pretty quickly, and it should have won, honestly. Like, my game at this point was definitely pretty good. So let's see. Black developed the bishop with a tempo, which was kind of annoying, but I brought my rook over because I felt like, you know, maybe pushing this pawn was going to happen at some point, and I kind of wanted my rooks over on this side of the board anyway. So that was all right. We trade here, and this is again good for me because I'm thinking I want to trade off that bishop anyway. And so that trade happens. Now I do have an isolated pawn, but I feel like generally I've gotten everything that I want at this point in the game, right? My rook is on a semi-open file, which is great. I'm ready to start pushing these pawns down the board. I might have to do something about this bishop at some point. Actually, I don't, because on the next move, they just move the bishop out of the way. So now I'm just going to start, you know, pushing these pawns and see if I can open up this king and attack it. And I feel like this has to be better for white. And it turns out, according to the engine, it's plus 1.4, 1.5, something along those lines. So it's definitely better for white. Like, it's not, you know, winning at this point, but I feel like I'm the one putting the pressure on and having initiative and pushing for a win, or at least a better position at this point. So then they played f5, and I decided to capture en passant because I felt like this just kind of started opening things up more, and also gets rid of my problem of the isolated pawn. And so they capture with the rook. This was kind of a dumb move. It was kind of a waste of time. I thought that maybe getting the queen here before pushing this pawn might be interesting, and then, you know, once this opens up, I have some potential attack here. But as I said, it was kind of a waste of time. They could just play queen f8. And now, like, since I'm trying to attack, I don't want to trade queens right now, right? So I just pull my queen back out of the way. And it's worth noting, actually, here that the fact that this bishop is defending the rook is pretty important, because otherwise black would be winning a rook here, which would not be okay. So anyway, bringing my queen back here kind of puts a bit of pressure in various places, which is good. But I did feel like I kind of got pushed back a little bit at this point. And so black just continues improving. Now the queen is covering all of these dark squares. The rooks can potentially get doubled up on the f-file. But I decide, all right, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep trying to open up the king. I still think that I should be better here. I'm going to go for the attack. And after doubling up, I decide to trade off a rook. And then this didn't feel like really the right move either to me. Like it seemed like maybe taking back with the rook might have been better. I suppose this way they don't have an isolated pawn. But now, like, what was the point of moving the rook here, right? Like, now the rook has to move again, sort of thing. So anyway, I don't know. I felt like my attack should be able to continue. So finally I capture here. And of course they take back. And now, finally, I've started to open up some lines. Now, I've lost one rook, right? I had to trade one rook off, so my attack maybe isn't quite as strong. And the queen is also defending. So this is the point where it's not super clear what to do, but I sort of thought, you know, I should be able to figure something out, right? I spent so long on this move. Like, I don't remember. I didn't start writing down my times in this game, but I feel like I must have spent like 20 minutes here trying to figure out how to continue, because it's not super clear. Like, I've spent all this time, you know, trying to open up the H file and trying to figure out how to attack along that. But now he's defending. Like, these pawns are pretty good. The queen is pretty nice there. I don't have my dark squared bishop to help out. And this pawn is still kind of awkwardly in the way. I'm down to one rook instead of two. Like, it is not clear how to proceed in this position, right? And I spent way too much time. I basically froze. I was like, are you serious? Like, how can I not figure out how to keep my attack going, right? There were actually two moves that I was seriously considering, and I did not play either of them. As it turns out, they were the two best moves in the position. And so I'm going to show you what they were. But I had sort of some reasons why I didn't like these moves. The first one seems like it should be fairly obvious, actually. There's a hanging pawn over there, right? The queen could just simply take that pawn and I would be up a clean pawn. I would be threatening another one. It's defendable, but I would at least be threatening it. And, you know, why not? This seems like it could be a good move. There were a couple of reasons why I didn't. One sort of small reason is I felt like maybe there was some kind of counterplay, bringing the rook over and then maybe putting pressure down here and along with the bishop. And I didn't really like that. But I mean, it works out just fine. Like, if black goes over here, then I just simply capture here. And now the knight is hanging. And if the knight moves, and the rook is hanging. So this would have been totally fine. The bigger reason why I didn't end up taking this pawn is because I felt like it was kind of giving up on my attack. I felt like it was the wrong idea. Instead of just winning a pawn on the opposite side of the board, I should be focusing on attacking the king and making that work, right? And so this was kind of one of the lessons, and I'll go a little bit more into it later, but I kind of discounted this plan, which would have been perfectly fine because I felt like my attack should be better than this, basically. The other move that I was seriously considering was this one, knight b5. And this would have been a fantastic move. And the thing that this is doing is I have some pressure on this bishop. And so if the knight moves away from defending the bishop, then I'm going to take it. And now, like, my bishop can come onto this diagonal and things are looking really bad for black. And I didn't play this move because I saw that black could do this, which would have been their best move, in fact. And it means that the bishop is no longer under attack. You know, I could trade here, and actually trading here would have, as it turns out, been perfectly fine. But I was a little bit worried about like the bishop coming down and taking this pawn and attacking the rook. And I just, after losing a few games in a row, I didn't trust myself to calculate this out correctly. And as it turns out, I literally only would have needed to calculate one move further. There was this fantastic move right here, Queen c5, which I did not see. And Queen c5 is nice because it's a fork. I'm attacking the bishop and the knight, and the bishop can't even do something like this because now my bishop is going to get onto this diagonal and things are just going downhill very quickly for black. And so I literally just had to find from this position, I guess, I had to find that, you know, after this and this, I just need to play Queen c5. And that should totally be findable, I think. But I did not find that in this game, and I simply did not know what to do about Queen d5. And, Bishop d5, sorry. And so I didn't play this, and this would have been the best move, actually. And I totally considered it. I looked at it, I did some calculation, couldn't figure out how to handle this, and so I didn't play it. And so instead, I played a move that was an absolute blunder. I played pawn to g4, and I'm not even 100% sure why I did this. There were a few things at play, of course. As I mentioned, I didn't want to give up on my attack, and I felt like maybe if I put that pawn here, I could do something like this, get the queen onto this file, and maybe that would cause some pressure. I don't know, like, because this queen is still defending, so I don't know that that really even would have worked. Certainly one thing I was thinking of is the bishop can't take, because if the bishop does take, then I'm going to get my bishop onto this diagonal, and then again things are really bad. Like the king can't get out of the way, the black has to block with something, and things are bad. So this pawn can't be taken. But honestly, like, it was almost like I was playing for a trick, like trying to entice taking that pawn, and if they didn't do that, then, you know, what was I going to do next? And of course they didn't take that pawn. They played rook over, and then I brought the queen over, as I mentioned, but this is kind of an empty threat. There's not much that I can do. However, there is one thing that, one sort of trick I had up my sleeve, which I did manage to play and continue to have sort of the upper hand in this position. And that was after a move like this, I actually took this pawn. And that's possible because if the queen takes, then I bring my queen in. And then if the king tries to escape, I bring in my rook, and things start to fall apart for black. And so this was starting to feel nice again. I felt like I kind of messed things up, but maybe I can get back into the game with this sort of tactic, right? And then black found this great move, knight f4, which is a fork of my bishop and my queen. And it turns out the best move, according to the engine, is to move the bishop up here to h7 with a check, and then I can get my queen out of the way. But it's not so simple. Like this pawn is kind of hanging, and there are some complexities there. So what I ended up doing is I brought up my queen and forced a queen trade instead. And that wasn't really the best move, but it wasn't the end of the world. We traded. And then basically I thought, like, I knew this pawn was still hanging, but I thought that I was going to be okay after bringing my bishop back here. And I labeled this as a blunder. It's not actually a blunder, but I didn't see what was going to happen. And so I considered it a blunder during the game, and probably I would have had a better plan that I could have done if I had sort of seen where this was going to go. Basically, after trading the bishops, now I don't know what to do about rook e5. And so the issue here is I finally won this pawn with that clever tactic on g6, and now I was just going to lose a pawn, and not only that, but black was going to have a passed pawn that I was going to have to be dealing with. And this is, I think, when psychology started to kick in, because I was like, okay, I had an attack, right, that should have been winning. I had a position that absolutely should have been winning. And I felt like already I had thrown that away. It turns out I hadn't quite yet. There is a solution here, but I felt like, you know, in the end, even though I didn't, you know, take that free pawn with the queen, the only thing that I had gotten out of my attack was just one pawn. And now I was about to lose that one pawn advantage that I had, right? And so in my head, I was like, wow, I just threw this away. And sometimes I feel like when you get that in your head, then even if you haven't thrown it away yet, you can play as if you have. And that's what happened here. It turns out there was a pretty simple solution to losing this pawn, and that was rook d1. And so it's not a matter of defending this pawn. That's basically all I was looking for. It's like, oh, there's no way for me to defend that pawn, so therefore I'm going to lose it. And that's correct, except that with the rook on d1, I have counterplay. If the rook takes here, then I can go up here with check, and now I'm going to win this pawn, and the other pawn is maybe also in trouble. And so that's what I had to look for here, was counterplay instead of defensive play. But I didn't see it. I figured, okay, we're getting into an endgame. We're equal on material. As long as I can handle this passed pawn, then maybe I can get a draw here. And in fact, this was the move that made it a draw, according to the engine, instead of bringing the rook over. So, okay, the game goes on. Black took the pawn, and from here, we kind of did some maneuvering. I was a little bit worried. Like my biggest concern at this point was I didn't want to trade down too many pieces, because if you picture this kind of position on the board without the pieces, if it was only pawns, right, then black has a passed pawn, and it's looking a lot like a fox in the chicken coop kind of scenario, where this pawn starts moving down the board, my king has to go and block it, and while my king is dealing with this, the black king can potentially come down and gobble up my pawns. Like, it's probably not quite that bad yet, but that's what I was worried about. I was concerned that that could happen pretty easily. And so I wanted to leave pieces on the board, at least until I, dealt with that passed pawn. And so we kind of maneuvered. I'm going to go through this part a little bit more quickly, because there was a lot of thought, a lot of things that had to happen. But basically that was the main plan, is I didn't want to trade too many things off, and I wanted to eventually deal with this pawn if I could. And then finally we get into this position, and I was feeling like, black had a lot of great activity. I was playing pretty defensively at this point, and I wasn't really getting these pawns rolling, although I was pretty close, right? Like I totally was, I was a move away from pushing b4. And one thing I didn't really realize, and this was another really good lesson, is that yes, black has a passed pawn, but I also have a 3-on-2. And that can be just as powerful. At least like that's good counterplay, right? If I can get these pawns rolling down the board, trade a few off, and get my own passed pawn, then things are starting to look much better for me. And I suppose if I can do it in such a way that the outside pawn is my passed pawn, then that's even better. But in any case, I should be able to make a passed pawn, and it should be even at this point. And according to the engine, it is even at this point. But I think psychology-wise, I was just like, I've been throwing away this game. I feel like I'm losing. I feel like there's nothing I can do about this pawn. So what I need to do is I need to just get rid of it. And I sacrificed my knight for that pawn, which throws away the game on the spot. Like, I shouldn't say that. It doesn't throw away the game on the spot. I think there actually was still like an engine line here that maintains close to equality, but there was no way that I could have found it. And so what I did here is I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna get rid of that problem, and now I'm gonna start pushing my pawns down the board. Turns out this was not the correct plan in this position. Like I say, the engine line is kind of a weird one. And the game didn't last too much longer. I mean, we maneuvered around, I lost a pawn, and then I felt like I was pretty much forced to trade rooks, which was bad. And then, at this point, it's pretty much hopeless. Like that pawn is going to be lost. I played it out till checkmate, because after this pawn was lost, I still felt like maybe I could put my king in front, and there was some chance that I could stay in front and cause some kind of stalemate. But in the end, that was not possible. My opponent was very good at this kind of winning endgame, and they totally won. So why did I lose this game? I always love to ask myself this kind of question, because then I know what I can do to improve and what sort of the key lessons are that I can take away from it. So I think where everything really started to unravel was back here on move 23. And this was not the move that threw away the game, but it's just kind of weird that there are two perfectly good plans. Admittedly, one is more complicated than the other, but two perfectly good plans that I could have chosen. And I was just so focused on my attack that I didn't consider these plans closely enough. As I mentioned, taking the free pawn would have been absolutely fine. And this move here, even I just had to calculate one move deeper, and it would have been totally fine. And so I think one of the lessons here is sometimes an attack like this and a good position like this doesn't necessarily have to culminate in a checkmate or an actual attack on the king. Sometimes there are other ways to sort of cash out of your attack, as it were. And in this case, taking this pawn, threatening the other pawn, and maybe winning it later would have been a totally fine way to sort of cash out of this attack and still have a better position. It doesn't feel good to do this sort of thing in this position because, again, I've been working and working and working at trying to open up this king. But at some point, just looking at the position and saying, actually, that king's pretty safe. Maybe this file can still be useful in the future. Let's just go over here and start causing problems on the other side of the board, right? Being so focused on one half of the board and completely ignoring the other side can sometimes be an issue. Now, sometimes the attack can have a better outcome. And sometimes, doing something like this is kind of giving up a little bit too early. And that's what I was sort of aware of and trying to stay away from. But in this case, as it turns out, this would have been a perfectly fine plan. And again, with the knight move, I just needed to calculate one move deeper. Like, I just needed to find that queen move. The fact that it's a fork, it's a little bit hard to see from this position that works, and especially with, this pawn hanging with a tempo on the rook. But basically that's all I had to see there. I don't know if there's much of a lesson here other than just, particularly since I was spending so much time on this position, I just felt like I wasn't confident in my ability to really calculate this. And, I think it is what it is, but it's something, worth thinking about. Like, take some of these calculations just like a move further and see if you can find solutions to some of these problems. The second lesson I wanted to mention is here on move around here, basically, when, as I mentioned, I brought the bishop back. I'm not really pleased with that move or with this sort of plan, but then, again, just being so focused on the fact that I was going to lose that pawn back and there was no way to defend it, that I didn't look for what would have been perfectly fine counterplay. And I think that's a pretty good lesson for me and hopefully for you as well, that sometimes playing defensively, sometimes that's the way that you have to do things, right? But sometimes instead of looking for defensive moves, looking for counterplay can be just as effective. And I feel like I shot another video a while back that had this same kind of lesson. I think it's one that maybe is a bit of a weakness of mine that I have to learn, and reinforce a few times. But this game certainly helped to reinforce that one. And then the last one here is just simply, as I mentioned, like my 3-on-2 should be, like, if I can play it right, it should be just as powerful as this passed pawn and should be good enough counterplay that I can maintain equality in this game. And in this position, I just didn't see it. And I sacked the knight when I shouldn't have, and should have just, pushing b4 seems like a perfectly sensible move in this position. And I think it is the top engine move, actually. And it seems like, in retrospect, it seems very obvious that this is what I should have done. But during the game, it didn't seem as obvious for some reason. And so this is a good one to keep in mind as well, that something like a 3-on-2, especially when the opponent's king is on the other side of the board, something like this can actually be really strong and can be comparable to a passed pawn. Even though, like, again, the passed pawn was quite worrying. The knight was covering the promotion square. I was a little bit worried that I wasn't going to be able to get my knight back in time or something like this. But the 3-on-2 at this point would have held it at bay, basically. And so I feel like this is a very instructional game. At least it was a very instructional game for me. It was a very painful game. And again, I think this can help to really solidify these sorts of lessons when it was kind of particularly painful or memorable for some reason. And it happens. Sometimes we have perfectly good positions, we have winning positions, and we throw them away because of some mistake. But I think, no game like this is ever a waste as long as we learn from it. So I've learned from it. I hope that it was helpful for you and that you've learned a thing or two from this game as well. If so, definitely hit like and subscribe down below and leave a comment. Let me know what you find interesting about this game, or maybe tell me something about one of your games like this where it was a particularly painful loss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.